Marcus Aurelius. Sometimes it occurs to me as if the criticism of destructive cults was mainly introduced by concerned parents, especially in the 1970s and 80s. Do we have to consider the possibility that some points of cult criticism are in reality the maintenance of questionable societal norms and potentially the symptom of a new generation, becoming more and more independent, colliding with the traditions and values of the previous generation, and which is frightened about changes in society and a subjective feeling of alienation to their children? Maybe scapegoating cults, considering them as having a somehow indecent influence on the youth. For instance, parents of young members of the Rajneesh Bhagwan cult were often concerned because of the group's progressive mindset concerning sexuality. How is it possible to differ between appropriate cult criticism and undifferentiated maintenance of traditional family ideals and societal structures? Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely convinced that there are destructive cults using dangerous and psychologically harmful techniques of control, manipulation, thought stopping, and hypnosis. But how can we tell the difference between a benign, socially progressive group and a destructive cult? Okay, that's a good question. And because in the 1970s and 80s, there were cult scares, and there was an actual kind of plague within law enforcement communities and across the Christian right channels, 700 Club and stuff, about Dungeons and Dragons and about demonic cults, and these were blown entirely, like way out of proportion. I mean, to this day, I have people reference me to this stuff, and I'm just like, man, you need a little history lesson in how exaggerated things became during that time period, and there was kind of a cult craze. So that was rough because, and also, of course, at the time there were not techniques laid out on how to get people out of those kind of situations constructively either. There was deprogramming going on, which was basically kidnapping someone and engaging in more mind control techniques and thought stopping techniques and heavy indoctrination techniques on the person in order to get them out of the cult. That's no good. That hardly ever worked. And it brought a really bad name on a lot of people, and families were very desperate, and there was a lot of scare tactics being used on all sides, talking about the influence of these things. And it turned out that, some of this was generated by parents, especially Christian parents, unfortunately, who went a little, about the Satan cults and stuff, when in fact, the person wasn't necessarily involved in satanic cults or rituals at all. They thought Scientology was satanic. They thought Dungeons and Dragons was satanic. They thought, anything that wasn't what they were doing was satanic, and it got pretty crazy. So that's kind of where this question's coming from, and I understand that. So now we have an increased awareness of what cults, destructive cults are, and we have a better understanding of how to deal with people who get involved in destructive cults and how to do interventions, not, interrogations or kidnappings, but, you can stage a constructive intervention that consults and gets the person's willingness to be part of the process in order to get them out of that situation. And there's no part of those processes anymore, those intervention things, at least not that I'm aware of, that involve any kind of, anything like the rigors that were involved in the 70s and 80s. So, in order to differentiate as far as what are you dealing with, well, there's a checklist. It's got, I think, about 12 or 13 points or something on it, maybe more, that was put together by Janja Lalich and Michael Angione. And this checklist is on my website, which is linked below, mncriticalthinking.com. And there's a whole page which is just, the cult checklist. And that is not a, okay, check each point off, okay, we've got ourselves a cult. You have to use it with some knowledge and some skill, which means you have to thoroughly investigate the group in question. You can't, very rarely do you just look at a group and go, oh, destructive cult. You got to do some research. You got to figure out, are they or aren't they, right? I mean, some people have said, that the Boy Scouts are a cult, so that there's some people who assert to me on this channel that every religion is a cult or a destructive cult, and I go, no, that's not how it is. So you have to look at the group specifically that you're looking at, not necessarily the big broad group, because if you looked at, Christianity, let's say, or Buddhism, let's say, well, that's not going to necessarily get you a precise answer for the subgroup, the subgroup that the person's involved in at the local guru house in, Encino, California, right? Like, you need to get that group looked at. What are they doing? And it's not the belief system. You want to look at actions. You want to look at what they're doing. And you especially want to look at the relationship between the leadership and the followers. How do the followers talk about the leader? How does the leader talk about his followers? How are there, are there any secret things going on in this group? If so, why are they secret? How are people, indoctrinated? Can you look at the scriptures or look at the writings? If it's not a religious group, can you look at the materials? Can you look at what they're doing? Are they open? Are they transparent? Or are they closed off and a little suspicious of outsiders? Like I said, there's a whole list of things that you could look for as far as characteristics. And you have to take each group individually and just run it down that way. There's no substitute for the understanding and ability to do that. Otherwise, you get really stupid stuff like the Boy Scouts are a cult, and stuff like that, which is just not, no. Sorry guys, no. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. If there's anything about the checklist itself, or anything else about this question that you felt I didn't quite get, go ahead and let me know. But otherwise, I hope that helps.